Okay, well, welcome everyone today to our Dahdaleh Institute seminar. And before we begin, let me start with a land acknowledgement. So, and as this is a hybrid event and some of us are in different territories, please take time to give thanks and recognize the land you're currently living and working on. So today we're here at the York University campus in Toronto, otherwise known as Toronto, and we acknowledge its current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And this territory is also home of other First Nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. This territory is also subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably care and share for the Great Lakes region. And this acknowledgement is really just the first step in our process of getting to know our First Nations and supporting them and looking for opportunities to engage with them. So with that, I'm just really excited to share with you the profile of Pravin Pillay, who's a speaker, designer, artist, investor, and advisor, whose work sits at the intersection of emerging technology, consciousness, and cultural wisdom. As creative director of MOVE37XR, he pioneers immersive storytelling experiences that foster empathy, sustainability, and intercultural exchange, drawing on decades of experience as a multimedia artist, permaculturalist, and practicing yoga. A sought-after speaker and advisor, Pravin brings transformative insights to bioregional and global stages and organizations, cultivating complex adaptive systems with a focus on indigenous innovation, ancient wisdom practices, planetary health, and computer-human interactions. As a designer and artist, his groundbreaking projects such as Hyperobject 108 and The Rain is the River is the Ocean blend bioregional with cutting-edge XR to create deeply resonant systems-based experiences. Beyond the creative realm, Pravin is an active investor and strategic advisor, co-founder of Humanitas Smart Planet Systems, founder of Emergent Performance Consulting and creative systems architect for the Indigenomics movement, where he champions progressive interdisciplinary ventures that bridge technology, tradition, and future-ready organizational and leadership development. And just before we get started, I'd just like to note that for all of our in-person participants, that you please return your headphones and blindfolds at the end. So thank you so much, Pravin. We are really looking forward to your presentation.
All good? Okay, ready to go. Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Pravin Pillay, and we're here to do a little bit of an experiment as well as experience in terms of what I do in the world, and hopefully may influence how you move through the world with your research, with your activities. And that's part of the objective of today, is really about rethinking how we approach the problems, even the problem solution mindset, what that's about, and really working with the idea of complexity. And so that's really the focus of my work. But we're going to get into that. First, I want to start with a little bit of a beginning part to that. So let me get my tools here. Here we go. So Alice in Wonderland, one of my favorite beginnings, because one of the questions when we talk about the question of I, who am I, but also who are we as a species? And then how do I fit in all of that? And this is a really important question because we often look at there's I and then there's other. Complexity, when we start to look at and really go deep into it, is actually realizing that that's actually just a story, that we know there's interconnections. We just had an exchange. There's an interconnection. And we're constantly changing not only molecules and all sorts of things, but we're also changing thoughts. Things are moving between us. There's a constant flow of information and energy. So who am I? Well, okay, well, let me talk about a few of my roles. In my introduction, there were some that were named there. And so let me go to this one. So I'm the creative director of MOVE37XR. So that's one role, one hat I play. So I used to teach at Emily Carr University. I've worked in human-computer interaction. I have an MFA. I also have an MBA. I also have a specialist in permaculture. So lots of different things, because one of the things that I really enjoy is not only in the arts of moving between sculpture and these traditional forms, but these emerging forms and advanced technology. So I also work with artificial intelligence. So one of my other roles is I'm the creative systems architect, big title for the indigenomics movement. And we're developing things like indigenous AI, to apply to real world solutions and mapping economies and opportunities. But the real key to this is understanding the mindset, and that will come back to that. The next part is I'm managing director, and you've heard I'm a co-founder of Monetary Smart Planet Systems, which was a venture capital art experiment. Because when I went and did my MBA, first of all, I wanted to experiment with different ways of thinking, of investing that the current venture capital world didn't work into. And so I wanted to explain, and I actually found that in traditional academia, there were boundaries, there were silos. Now, this was in the late 80s. There was no such thing as a green MBA. And I was really concerned about this thing called climate change, carbon loading, that in my undergraduate I'd identified here at McMaster University. And I was like, oh, I guess I got to switch up channels here, because nobody's really paying attention to this, especially the people that are bringing these technologies and could be bringing these technologies to the forefront. So it was really important to step in. So that's one of the hats that I wear. And so I invested in climate tech. In 2017, we had our first AI exit. In 2019, that was a 3x very quickly, over 6 months. So things like that. It's just understanding, and the idea of doing that is moving to this place of understanding emergence, and emergence being something that is close to technology versus when we talk about systems thinking, which is working with the current paradigm and optimizing within it, problem solution. There's two different ways. Problem solution is sort of looking at the present, looking at emergent properties, and looking backwards. And then complexity looks at the present and is looking forward. Okay, so we're going to come back to that. And then my other role is, let's see here, I'm a community fellow here. Why am I connected here? So you may know Dr. James Arbinski. Well, he and I were on a project early in my career called Doctors Without Borders. So I helped to establish that. I was on that early team. I'm not one of the founders or anything like that, but I was on that early team. And that's where I really understood this idea of adaptive organisms and organizations, and understood how people within that, how our wellness as well, and I know that's part of the features of this community, how wellness plays into that. We're dealing with a very unique time in our lifetimes, what we call the metacrisis, and we'll be coming back to that. And how do we manage that? How do we live within that and move forward? So part of that is part of the work that I do. I'd like to, before I move on, because this is very important, let me see here. Land and lineage. Well, we had a great intro to the recognition of this place, but it's very important to introduce oneself well. So my lineage, I'm South African born in apartheid South Africa, South Asian descent, so 4 generations, 5 on one side in South Africa. And I grew up here in Port Credit. And for the last 30 years have lived on the west coast of Canada, was invited there in ceremony by the First Nations to bring my gifts to that. I was recruited away. I was on loan to the federal government from Doctors Without Borders, and this group out west recruited me away to come and settle and see what I could do and there. So I'm also, it was stated that I'm also a practicing yogi. My teacher is Baba Haridas. You might have heard of Ram Dass. He was Ram Dass's, I guess, TA, right? So he was the person instructed to help Ram Dass move forward and learn some of the techniques. So, that is my lineage and how I approach my world. It forms my worldview, and that's why it's so important. So currently I live on what is known as Salt Spring Island, particularly Wenenetch, which is the Sayout Nation, a small island off the west coast of Canada between Victoria and Vancouver. and that's where I make my home. The land has been occupied and been engaged for 5,000 to 10,000 years. So I feel very honored to be a steward of it. I would like to then, let's move on. So our inquiry today is really, oh, sorry, two things. Data poetics. And then what is artistic inquiry versus scientific inquiry, technological, engineering. These are all, and design. How do these differ? So we're going to look at that. And data as representational versus poetic. And why poetic? Why is that even important in a world where there's so much happening? And this is a really important part of why I did an MFA after I did my MBA. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right in because I want to start with the body. I figured usually I would just go through a talk and what have you. But I figured everybody here is in that sort of doctoral world, academic. So we're all up here, right? We're all thinking this way. So let's work with the actual practice of embodiment and listening and experiencing data. So everybody should have headphones now. For the people that are online, I don't think you're going to be able to experience this. So unfortunately, right now, but we will overdub later. So you can come back to it and you'll be able to experience it online at a later date. Okay. But for now, if everybody, you should have your headphones on. And if you have the blindfolds as well, you can put those on if you feel comfortable. That'll improve the experience. Okay, and you should be to blue. Okay. Yes. Okay, so everybody got them to blue? Yeah. And if you're going to use the blindfolds, put them on first before you put the headphones. Okay, we're all set. We got a couple people more. Okay, the first thing, everybody can hear my voice as well, because I'm going to speak loudly. Okay, so the first thing we're going to actually listen to is data from a data set, which is about Arctic oscillations. To summarize very simply, it's mapping things in the Arctic and really around the jet stream. It gives us some variability. It's actually a really nice data set to work with because it's got variability. So for our purposes in aesthetics, it enables us to move through. First we're just going to hear and listen to the data as points. Okay, so that's our first one. So hopefully this will work. We can get it going here. Let's see, there's my mouse. Everybody hear that? Click, click, click. Let's hear the tones. So I've made some choices, just one aesthetic choice. And we're just following the data going from 1953 to present of those oscillations. That's how long it's been tracked. So I took the data and I transposed it into what's known as MIDI and tones. And then I just chose an instrument, in this case, a kind of a string, plucking of a string. So that's a very simple one. Now we're going to move to the same data set with strings again, but sped up. So you can, I just want you to experience the difference between those two. There's an aesthetic intervention that I've made as an artist to communicate that data set. Okay, we'll go back to the first one. Feel the difference in the emotion. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to move to something a bit more compositional. Let's see here, just the remote to set it up. And this is the exact same data set, now with a bit more interpretation as an artist. That was a bit annoying, isn't it? Same data set with 3 different filters. And now into a B minor key. Yep. Completely different experiences. Okay, so that's our first experience. You can take your headphones off for a second. We're just going to key in on that. I don't know if we can turn the lights on. That's right. Oh, there we go. Can we just turn the lights on a bit? Okay, so that was our first experience. I just want to ask you, so what was your impression? That's the Arctic changing from 1953 to like last year, well, 2025, earlier measurements this year. Now, what are the implications of those data sets not actually being available? Government shutdown in the US, not being updated, okay? Geopolitical understandings, there's complexity here. We rely on data, and how we communicate this out and how it's understood is really important. Part of what I understand why I'm here as part of this institute is about how do we communicate this out, not only to our peers, but to the public, and bring into these other ways of thinking. Okay, it's really important to understand that the nature of art is very different from the nature of science. The query is rigorous as any other, but it's maybe not as understood because it's got this poetic part. It deals with complexity in actually elegant ways, as elegant as science deals with data in very clear, rational ways. And this is the part that perhaps, if we'll come to this as well, the difference between intellect and wisdom. I'm going to make the assertion that we have abundance of intellect and innovation in the world. I ask how wise are we? Where I come from, the Nuchalnath, have a 1,300-year planning cycle based on the life of a cedar tree. Now that, to me, sounds smart and wise. Maybe what we think of innovation is actually really remembering how to do things well in the world. The land acknowledgement that we had at the beginning is a reminder that we can come to a data set, interpret the information, but if our model is incorrect, if our mind or our social model is incorrect, we cannot see the wisdom that's there. This is a key point. So I encourage you, when you're looking at your data, to think about that, to consider that. Okay. So we're going to go into another work now. This is a more composed work. It's called Hyperobject 108. Now you might ask, what's a hyperobject? It's actually an art-based term. It's to deal with complexity, but things that are so large and so complex and so vast in time, they affect us all the time, but we don't necessarily know them. We can't really understand them. Human minds are, okay, saber-toothed tiger, bad, run away. It's an object, right? I can deal with that. Climate change. Oh, well, it's heating temperature, ocean acidification, there's implications on food. It's a very complex thing that takes place over a span of time, which is hard to get my mind around. So when I'm looking at solutions, problem solution mindset, it's actually difficult. So we find ourselves taking strands and threads because that's where our key performance indicators are. How well are we doing on this and doing on that? So again, it's a different approach. So we're going to listen to something, and this was launched, we did it at the H.R. Macmillan Space Center with the Indigenomics Institute. And the idea was to start an exploration of communicating to the public this complex thing of climate change and culture and wisdom. And so it was an immersive experience that was distributed across the entire Space Center with installations. And what we're going to listen to is the acoustic composition. We had it originally proof of concept at the Winter Arts Festival, where we took over an entire building and did the exact same thing. Okay, then we did the proof of concept. Then we did the actual prototype, and now we're taking it into the next stage, which is refining it for different publics. Okay, but again, remember, it's an artistic interpretation, but what it does is it invites people into thinking a different way about their reality. That's the place, right? Invitation versus, oh, you can't understand this. Oh, you just experienced a hurricane, but that's just one part of climate change. So we're opening up people to new ways of being. So let's see. Go to this. We've had our first immersive moment, and then we're going to go to Hyperobject 108. Okay, so this is going to take a few seconds just for me to load up. So just give me a second here. And in this one, there will be a number of artists that were involved. And so it wove together a whole complex system and enable people to actually merge into the complex system, walk around inside it to understand that there was a distributed system. So that was the first step, right? We've got to ladder people into these complex notions. So first step, complex system, and then the aha moment, the eureka. Oh my gosh, this is actually a woven, curated experience that now I understand. I've actually walked through this mini hyperobject, and now I can experience the complexity of the system. Okay, so now this has chants in it. It has some ancient chants. It has some new Cholnath chants done by Carol Ann Hilton of the Indigenomics Institute, my business partner and founder there. She's on my board of directors for MOVE37XR. And it has Ruby Singh, who's a Juno-nominated award musician, part of our arts collective. We are all focused on these issues. And you may ask why are artists of such profile and people of such profile involved. We have Sandra Semchuk, who received the Governor General's Medal or Award for Media and Art in 2017. She's a mentor, a former professor of mine and collaborator. These are things that are so important. People are coming. James Zerbinski was on our founding board, right? So that tells you, he was the person that said, Prav, if you're going to do this, now's the time. So, okay, we were prototyping it at Presencing Lab that was started at MIT. And upon James's urging, I launched it into reality with the help of a crypto Bitcoin buddy of mine. So he gave me a little grant to get going on it. So we're going to listen to Hyperobject or experience Hyperobject 108. And I'm going to do a live composition. So this is not recorded. So we'll see where we go. So headphones on, blindfolds if you'd like. If you're comfortable with that. There you go.
grandfather taught me that everything is ceremony.
This act shall be known and may be cited as the Indian Act 1876 and shall apply to all the provinces and to the Northwest Territories, including the territory Superintendent General, Minister of Interior, Superintendent General Indian Affairs, which may govern the supervision of the said affairs, and in the control and
Every time we say $100 billion indigenous economy, it reawakens the Indian and the child that Johnny McDonald tried to kill.
His presence, life itself.
Every time we say $100 billion indigenous economy, it reawakens the Indian and the child that Johnny McDonald tried to kill. The experience is a reawakening. To be present with yourself, to be present with your family, to be present to ceremony. To feel the sun, to feel the wind, to feel the earth, to feel responsibility. Of how we're present to ourselves, how we're present to others, how we're present to that transmission of ceremony and its transmission of teachings. But exists as present. But exists as present. But exists as present. That is the prayer, that is a ceremony, and a ceremony is life.
Did the clicker go? I don't know. It just sort of jumped ahead on its own. Oh, here it is right there. Okay. Oh, that's right. Oh, well, you got to go back. So you're getting the the advanced version. Okay. So so hyperobject 108 experience, the first introduction to what hyperobject, just to start dialogue. Like, what is hyperobject? What is that about? Why are you talking about that? Why is that important? What is it? What's important about that concept? And what it's again verging on this place of wisdom of how do we see beyond our worldview, what I call is the event horizon of our minds. We often are conditioned by our cultural awareness, our academic awareness, all of these things, right? And they give us a heuristic, a way of making shortcuts to navigate reality. However, we will find that the map is often and usually not the territory. If we want to navigate reality well, we need to understand the territory, really feel it out, and that requires using the full human capacity. So, okay. So one of the things that we didn't experience, and we can experience now if you'd like, if we have some time. How are we doing on time there? Okay. How are people for staying a little bit longer, or do you need to leave it? Okay. Yeah. Okay. 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 So if as long as people are okay with that, we can go a little bit and we can do one more experience, which is just so in hyperobject 108, there's no data there. That is like our canvas. So think of it like a painting. You've got a canvas, you've got some oils, and now I'm looking for data that I'm going to overlay into that. So you heard about the atmospheric one. That was a really interesting piece, right? Arctic oscillation. Very interesting. Now I was looking, okay, well, I want to work on some of the, this idea um, of this metacrisis, because it's really complex. How do we get people understanding and not being overwhelmed, of feeling into it so they can bring their intelligence and their wisdom, not only to their professional, their lives in the world, but also their personal lives, their family lives, all the levels of organization that we as complex adaptive systems engage in. Okay, so this is data visualization. Okay, this is exactly, okay, so we take data, this is a design. It's not what we consider art, because it's taking data and mapping it in a very traditional way, but it's what it's telling us is it's informing us, right? So we can watch this change over time and what have you, and that's really informative. It's an infographic. So design, it has a purpose, it serves that function really well. But if we want to communicate a sense of the data or approach our data in a complex way, not a complicated way, which is a solution problem, which we'll get to, and why even with the SDGs, we need to rethink about how we actually approach these solutions, the modernist mindset, and it's the overhang, as we say, that academia is involved in, and how we approach this, because quite frankly, we know that time is short. We need to get this right, and we need to get it right quickly. Okay. Hence, you now know why I was at Doctors Without Borders, and now I'm here. Okay. And I made that choice very clearly to come to the arts because it was a way to communicate at this level, the ontological necessity for our survival as a species, to become and understand our place in the web of life. We've had a great run. Technology has done amazing things. Modernism has produced scientific institutions, but where are we now? We have to ask ourselves, is more of the same going to help us? Are we going to innovate our way out of this? Or are we rapidly losing runway? Okay, so we're going to go to this next experience. Sorry, my slide out of here. So this is temperature. And what we're going to do is, this is the first experiment. So what you are getting involved in is my artistic inquiry. This is where I am actually now, I've taken a data set from climate.gov, I believe it is, or NASA. And then I've now mapped it into MIDI, and I'm just at the beginning. And I think I'm going through my artistic inquiry. It's like, how do I communicate the sense, and how will I bring it into the composition so that people, when they're looking at these issues, when perhaps you're at a conference and now you're experiencing climate in a different way and temperature change in a different way, right? And informing, shall we say, the deeper, wiser part of you, to inform your actions, your very precise actions, and how you choose to spend your brief moment on this planet. Okay, so let's jump back in. Okay, so it's just going to take me, I just need to go back to the previous set. Okay, so this is world temperature. So make sure all my lower it down. Here we go. Now, this is just one data set, just world temperature, ambient temperature. And the challenge with data set is, of course, it's rising. So how do I make this and convey this, communicate this to our emotional body so it can direct our intellectual mind? Same data set interpreted through another aesthetic. Now taking the lowest ambient temperature, averages through the years, mixing it in. Okay, so a very brief one. So we could say that artistic inquiry has the same structure, but creative process and creative inquiry is very different from scientific inquiry. So we're going to get into that now. Okay, first of all, some feedback. How did you feel about that? This is my testing out. That's part of my artistic process. Test out things, ask them to respond. I'll play this with some other artists. If there's some, yes.
Very interesting, and like I like hear it from one side versus the other. But
Mhm.
I'm feeling this fast as it's getting longer.
Yeah, there's an urgency, right? Right. You know, now I could have interpreted and made it nice and calm and general, and at the end, but that's not necessarily what I want to do. But if I'm now as responsible for a person's creative journey, maybe I continue that piece as I did with the hyper object and bring you back into wholeness, so that there's a sense of agency and clarity, right? Intellect, experience, emotional body connection. We talk about mind-body connection again. One of our unfortunate pieces that we've split off since Descartes, right? And but now we have a time we can come back, right? This is the opportunity. This is, I think, humanity. Perhaps I'm an eternal optimist that perhaps we're ready to actually become a wise species, deserve the title Homo sapiens sapiens. That'd be great, a great honorific for us. Okay. Here we go. So data poiesis, let me get to my notes here. So as I said, the difference between data visualization, straight science, right? We got data points, we map it, and we want to explain it in a short period of time, convey that information effectively. Really great. Data poiesis is a different way. We are experiencing the data, we're in the data, right? So there's an emotional piece. We're activating different parts of our mind. And if we think about how poiesis and wisdom, why is philosophy so important? Why is art so important? Why is it throughout every culture, this way, this worldview? Because it's the story we exist in. So we can have technologies, but they exist in a story. How we apply technologies, fire can be applied in a really good way. It can also be very destructive, right? And that can be part of the process, is understanding how technologies are in themselves, but our worldview and how and our intentionality behind them are really important. Okay. Let's get down to my notes here. Okay. Popped out of my, here we go. Okay, so data. So when we talk about data aesthetics, plastic visualization, data poesis, or data poetics, deals with these other emotional pieces. Poetry and data, you can have any sorts of data sets, you can use algorithms, and you're really working with it to create new methods of understanding, okay, to embody so we can activate that wisdom part. So we're going to go to that as our next piece here. So this is from our homepage on MOVE37XR. Okay, it was an early AI generated thing, so but this was done about 2 or 3 years ago. And part of it was I was working and I worked with the AIs and helped develop them and train them. But in this way, I was working and seeing if we could create a symbiotic relationship with technology. Again, AI technology can be used for hoodwinking your parents out of their life savings. It can also be used to develop wisdom. It can also be used to think in, X dimensions and look through data. And so I'm looking, so how can I collaborate with an AI that can look at data and examine it and absorb it in different ways so that I can then bring it to a different understanding of humanity. So a symbiotic relationship versus an antagonistic one where I'm making AI my slave for better efficiency. I'm not saying that it doesn't have roles and machine learning doesn't have roles, but this is my approach. It's a value-centered approach. So art informs our worldview, and this is what's really important. So we can produce all the solutions we want. We can be so innovative as a species. But if we don't have a worldview that is about right thinking, right application, we know it can go completely awry. Corporate, co-option, there's lots of things that happen. And corporations are great. They're great inventions. How they are applied and who is running them and how they work, that's really up to us. Okay, that's a species decision, okay, and a cultural decision. So let's inquire into the actual nature of intelligence and wisdom. We've touched on some things here. For design, we've done amazing. Technology, we were talking about how fast things are coming to bear, right? So I think we're actually a species, we're up to this job. We're up to, now the question is, do we deserve to stay in this beautiful dance called life? And we need to understand the difference between our idea of life and how to live with it and in it. The separation, which I think was one of our big challenges, which gave us a lot of ability to focus, was not necessary. Was intelligent, but not necessarily wise. But it provided us, maybe over the long run, it was very wise. It provided us with a basis to move forward. Okay, so let's go a bit deeper into that. Okay, so we all develop these simple ways of navigating the world. So intelligence is a good thing, but we need heuristics, simplified models. So let's look at one. Sorry, I'm going through my notes. Okay. Okay, here's a great project, Aswan Dam. Okay, marvel of technology in its day, one of the biggest structures in its day. Problem: Nile floods are unpredictable. Solution: build a dam. Problem solution, right? Assumptions: nature is controllable, side effects are manageable, engineering solves problems, benefits outweigh the costs. Well, okay. Yes, there were a lot of benefits, and there were a lot of unseen consequences because of our assumptions, our worldview. I'm just pointing to this, not to say that it wasn't a good or a bad thing, but to understand the limitations of our worldview. And because we may be very good at and innovative, our technologies can have unintended consequences. And our question is, when we're looking at emergence, is testing out what comes next. So rather than looking at, oh, how did we get here? And how do we now repeat that? We look at, okay, what's emerging in the present? And so we have to be very aware of our technologies. What is coming up, okay? Okay, so then we have this thing. Right? It's climate change. And look, this is the idea of the hyperobject, right? Fires. When I launched Humanitas Smart Planet Systems as a venture capital climate tech firm, we had these things on our website, and people said, "What are you doing? People aren't going to invest in this," right? Within 2 years, we'd return all the capital to our investors. And it was, again, an art project. I approached it with my art brain. It was a financial project. It had to do its thing. It had to have intellect. It had to have rigor. But because I was thinking about it in a different way, and how we vetted our projects, vetted the entrepreneurs, the companies we worked with, and not in just solution problem, but understanding that complexity is to be very aware of what's emerging and choosing our investments based on that. Okay, so here we have a hyperobject. People may be experiencing this in South Sudan, where back in the MSF days, I spent some time. Of course, we had hurricanes, Category 5 storms in Jamaica recently, right? Fires in Alberta, across, I took my sons on a clean air vacation one year. We couldn't even make it up to Haida Gwaii, where I wanted to take them because all the ferries had shut down, and Haida Gwaii, rightly so, shut its borders to the rest of Canada, except for local residents. So I took my youngest son and we went down the Portland coast, following a clean air app all the way to a national park down there. Because, what's a father and son going to do in a time of apocalypse? Okay. So what I'm saying is that now, how do you take all of this as a parent, as an individual, as a researcher here? There's a lot of anxiety involved in this. So I want to put forth to you, your wellness is vital. How you approach this, not just by pushing it out, but how do you process this in a wise way? Okay, it's really important. Okay, so now we have climate change. Everybody knows this diagram, yeah? Okay, planetary boundaries. This is what got me going. I saw the report and I was like, okay, we have to move. We just surpassed the 7th one, ocean acidification this year. I want to say, if all our policies are working so well, why are we doing so poorly on carbon? Problem solutions. Because we're not my sense is, and I'm going to make this as a claim, but an assertion is that we are not thinking about it with the right frame. We're creating policies that solve the problem, but then something else comes out over here. And the complexity, because of the unintended consequences, undoes everything. Geopolitical, political parties, you name it. Okay. So you can see, now that's climate change, one thing. This is what we're dealing with. And of course, WEF, here's all the technological solutions. Very smart. Oh yeah, we're going to deal with it through technology. But is that not the problem solution mindset? So I just put it forth to you. Problems and solutions, yes, important. But is it the complete understanding of how we apply this? And is our thinking correct? And I just put that forth as a question to you. Okay. So let's go further. This is me taking you through an experience. Okay, we're going to ramp up the anxiety even more. Okay, this is from the World Economic Forum as well. The data set is, mostly executive decision makers with 900 experts across. And of course, you look at biodiversity loss, small, and then you have decline in health and well-being, being a big one. So this is from a very particular group of people. I don't know the bias. I haven't read through all of the things, but the paper is available online, and I'll make sure that in the follow-up notes you have access to that if you want to have a look at it. But this is how the folks at the WEF are looking at the world right now. Okay? How do you deal with this? Let's go back. Well, that's one part of it, maybe. But unintended consequences on all these other things. Are we, saber-toothed tiger, run away? We're not equipped for this. This is a hyperobject. Okay, it's surfacing all these places. These people are aware of the hyperobject, and they're developing policies in their individual area. They're developing research in their individual areas. But is it solving for what's creating this? The hyperobject itself. And I'm just using hyperobject as an abstraction, as a bridging term to complexity and systems thinking. And understanding that we need to move from systems thinking to complexity thinking. My colleague Julian Norris, who is one of the people that invited me to, got me to move out to the West Coast many years ago, decades ago. He is now teaching at a business school in Calgary, and he's a specialist in this area. So I'm going to refer to his writings, his blog posts. I do highly recommend. And I know him, I've traveled through Mongolia and Siberia with him, with indigenous elders and what have you, at the end of the fall Soviet Union. I know his approach and his methodology is sound. When I say it goes, he's an amazing musician as well. So I would just put, he's a full spectrum being. And I, like all of us, we all have our individual ways of being. So nobody's perfect, but we're all beautiful. I remind us to remember that. Okay. Let's go further. So, okay. So, I was asked to frame this and how to fit it in. Okay, so we set up, let's go actually this one, next slide. Great goal, right? This is admirable. We want this, don't we? Right? Well, most of us do. Maybe some folks might not. I just want this for a few people, maybe 2 billion people out of 7.5, 8+ billion people. Perhaps there's ways of thinking this might not be everybody's truth, but this is the goal that we're gathered around anyways. Let's go back to the SDGs. Okay, we're going to track KPIs towards certain goals. We're going to see how it works. Problem solution. But you can see that is trying to address, oops, no. There we go. It's trying to address this. Is this, and are we going to, I just show of hands, how many people think that we're going to meet this 2030 in any semblance? Anybody feel that the research is like we're killing it? Use my son's vernacular. I don't know, maybe it's not, that's old now, right? I don't think we're killing it at all. Despite the fact that we're a magnificent, elegant species that is innovative and intelligent. So this is what is my mission, right? If I say anything, I don't know if it's a mission, but it's my feeling is that we really need to understand that if we work in silos, if we think of ourselves as individual entities and not the complex dynamic, even this community here, we're a little, complex adaptive learning system right now. And you're going to move on to other ones and you're going to share things and transmit things, information. No. So those pieces are really important. Okay. So this is from Julian's work. Control fallacy. Somehow my slide got mixed up. Anyway, the solution fallacy that was associated on the other side, right? And so these things fail us when we're dealing with complexity. They just don't work. They don't, and we have the results, and the data shows it. Okay, so I'm not saying I'm going for national. I'm saying something else. Okay, so I'm looking at it, right? So problematic assumption number one, the control fallacy. I'm just going to read this from some of his writing here. Complex phenomena are inherently ecological, relational, multidimensional, and historical. They resist control. Any approach that works towards some ideal solution or structure without paying attention to the unknowable and emergent qualities of the landscape should be viewed with suspicion. Now that's hard if you've dedicated your life and your studies to doing this. I get it. I get it. And so what I ask you to do is to think about that and hold it. And you and your wisdom will find a way through. You'll reconfigure. I trust your intelligence and I trust your wisdom. Okay, the second part, the problematic assumption number two. The solution fallacy. Complexity, reality is not a problem that must be or ever can be solved. It is an ever-evolving dance to which we must continually adapt and align. It is the living mystery, not a puzzle to be solved. I'm adding the to be solved. This is from Julia. Don't get me wrong. Positive, proactive, radically accountable, get it done problem solvers are a breath of fresh air in any organization. And of course, many technical boundary constrained problems do indeed have solutions. You know, he cites sputtering engines, squeaky wheels, leaky roofs, broken legs, inefficient supply chains, and bad code can all be fixed. There's usually a right answer, a best practice, and a clear result. But in complex social and ecological contexts, a focus on results can just as easily end up displacing or strengthening whatever dynamics are generating the particular outcomes you seek to address. That's key, right? Position, do no harm, right? At least don't add to the problem. And we are all our good intentions, right? I was early in social media. I was early in PCs, high school hacker, that sort of thing, right? Portable devices, handheld devices. All of these things have had unintended consequences. So we need to figure out, and now in guiding AI, we're still looking at the unintended consequences because we think we're so smart, but we aren't in this case of applying wisdom. We need to get our wisdom quotient up. Our intelligence quotient's really great, but our wisdom quotient needs some work. And I think we have the answers. The answers have been held in our cultures, in indigenous ways of being and seeing traditional, and in our ancient wisdom that has been passed on because these are survival technologies. Storytelling is a way of surviving and passing on wisdom for a bioregion and for a collective. That can be held outside the individual. I may pass on, but my stories, they may be communicated. And that's true of a culture or a tribe that undergoes a specific tragedy. If the collective stories are held in the neighboring tribes, well, that place gets repopulated, re-engaged, and the stories continue. Important. Okay. Are we doing on time? Sorry. Okay, so we're moving over our time. If anybody needs to go, no worries, you can catch the rest of this online. We'll do a replay, okay? So this is the part, okay? So I referenced this. This is something that I only became aware of when I went to art school as a mature student. I went to art school in my 30s. Why? Ask yourself that. Okay. I'm going to reference one of my advisors, Nettie Wild, who also received the Governor General's Award. We're going to look at one of her, just a still image of one of her works, Go Fish. She went from being a documentary maker to immersive technologies. Why? These are important answers, questions and important answers. And I ask you to think about that as you're going through your work. So when we have a map, it's great if it's very accurate, but if the map's not accurate, it's not the place we're traversing. So what I want to say, I'm going to relate this to indigenomics and the $100 billion quote we heard when we did the impact. One of the things was the collection of data actually wasn't there. So nobody could actually map economic value from an indigenous perspective. So how can you make decisions, policy, based on this? So what we look at, how we look at it, and how we apply it is really important. And just because we're looking at one thing doesn't mean there isn't this whole part over here that we're not mapping that is actually relevant to the solution. Right? Our doors of perception here are finite. We need to open them up. Aldous Huxley. Oops, sorry. Okay, I'm not going to go through this, but this will be on you when you see the slide thing. But this is our current operating system. The World Economic Forum comes out of this. Our technological society comes out of this. It's brought us immense gains. The university system, everything. Okay, so we have a lot to be grateful for. I want to quote Vanessa, I hope we get her last name, Demacio Olivetti, and I'll, but in this idea of composting or modernity, all things come and go. Maybe it's time to let this one degenerate and go aside for a new way of looking at the world. Maybe it's served its purpose. I just put that forth. Okay. So I'm going to skip through this slide, but I'm going to jump over here. So modernism, this is me at art school, my mind undoing itself, like, oh my gosh, nothing's real, it's all fabricated. It was a hard time. There was like like existential crisis, like everything that I'd worked for it to achieve was being undone because I realized all of these things were just, they didn't make sense anymore. Reality itself started to become undone for me. And then metamodernism, maybe a different way to think about the crisis that we're in, right? Hybridity, maybe it has to be even beyond that. I don't know, but this is where I'm sort of landing right now. And here we are, we're vetted observers, but we act anyways. It's partially shaped, but we can influence things, but not everything. We can do what we can. You can see how this might map to MSF, right? Right? Reality as constructed and real. So it has these, these things that are cultural, but there's the real activity of death, dying, things happening. So it's a hybrid understanding, okay? Okay. So very quickly, this idea. So you've heard a lot about systems thinking. And this is, again, comes out of Julian's work, and complexity approaches, okay? And so this part here is where we're focusing on. I'm saying that this is good, it's important, it's worthwhile. This is the learning edge. And I'm just pointing you to it. Maybe you'll find an application to just think about how that applies to what you're doing in the world, how you're being. And not only in your professional, your academic research, but how you are as a person, as an individual in your many complex systems of organization, your families, your partnerships, your communities that you interact with. The question is, how do you shift an operating system without disassembling the entire species, right? This is the challenge. We want to continue. We want to continue through time. And so I think there is a way, or I hope there is. So contemplative artistic inquiry. So this is my area. As I said, I'm a yoga practitioner. I'm a yogi and also a householder. And I explore emergent awareness. Some of the experiments that you saw and heard about before, or heard, were those experiments in this place of contemplation. Because contemplation to me is a really essential part of being in the world. We act, we reflect, we consider, and then we shift. But contemplative, we have to be continuously aware of how our actual consciousness is interacting with our reality. So my part is to invite people into that act, whether it be at an art exhibition or in a seminar, places where art maybe won't usually turn up. An impact conference, maybe the World Economic Forum, maybe World Government Summit in Dubai. Hopefully scouting that out and by invite this year, right? So hopefully there are places, and then have people understand it is not a confrontation, but an invitation to be better as a human being, to be more in place, to find your way back into the web of life. Okay, so touched this already. Scientists ask what is true, how can we verify it? Cross the observer. This is what artists generally ask. And I'm not saying all artists, contemplative artists, artists who are in my community of creators. So what's alive here? I'm paying attention. So you can see right there, we're dealing with complexity. What's alive in this moment? I need to respond to that. I play with it. How do I enter this in a way that I can resonate with it? Because myself as a complex adaptive system, I'm going to find insights. And maybe if I communicate, this is where the skill comes in an effective way to the people that participate, they may undergo a transmission of sorts. Not maybe because of what I've seen, but they will find their own truth. Each one of us may have experienced the works in a different way if I didn't give you the context of them. You bring your own lived reality to it. So that's how it deals with complexity, right? Art in its finest form is an invitation to participate. Okay. So now, this is kind of mapping out artistic and create. Now, I will say creative process, this is not meant to be reductionistic because creative process is a thing, right? Everybody's going to approach reality, their creative process in different ways. This is kind of how I do it. And other people may find some inspiration in it or something. But this is, again, diversity through the modeling, not understanding that one model is the way. So I asked myself a question, look for the tension. Complexity, climate change, what have you, right now. How do we live well on the planet together? How do we engage our systems? Then I experiment. You saw some of the early experiments with the temperature. Right? I'm just playing around, trying to figure out, muddling my way through. It's okay. It's like being in a lab. My studio is in fact a lab. I'm playing with aesthetics, I'm playing with sounds, I'm working with other artists, and inviting collaborators in. Reflection and noticing, feedback from your peers, from the people that you're working with, getting that insight. How is this work falling for you? How's this feeling? Do you feel a shift? Is there something happening? Sometimes the purpose is actually to bore people right? To see if that can be part of art too, right? But I'm not saying that. And then you iterate, right? And so you can see it moves into a kind of a technological application at that point, iteration, and you're refining. So I've taken Hyperobject 108 as a proof of concept in a public place, got some feedback, refined it with Indigenomics impact at the Space Center as a proof of concept, and now I'm moving it to the next place where I'll start to incorporate data and interactivity to invite people to start to participate in the ground that we've created together. Okay, I'm going to go to some of our artists. Okay, there we go. So star stuff, Carl Sagan, we're all made of star stuff. So John Disnoyer Stewart is a fabulous artist. He's a postdoc at UBC right now. I found John. He was giving a talk with some really great people that I respected in the political venues of Vancouver. And I was like, why is an artist speaking on this panel? And then I listened in and I was like, oh, I get it. He's actually working from this space. So 100,000 children, I believe, this year, I can't remember the exact stat, have passed through this experience. It's a VR experience where you actually become a galaxy. Stars start to form around you. You meet in VR, galaxies are forming around, galaxies, and if you come together, the galaxy will then start to spin around you. There's a beautiful acoustic set, and there's a remarkable thing that happens for children and adults. You can be, this is in one place, but you could be on opposite ends of the planet and be in this space. Connectivity, empathy, and connection with awe. Ways to bypass our cognitive dissonance, move into this place of wonder, to invite children, people, to understand how magnificent it is to be conscious and alive, and how quickly we can throw that away in our personal lives and as a species, with other species. So this is, so John, I can't speak enough about how he approaches his work. I also shared I would, oh, there you go. This is Nettie Wild. So Nettie, as I said, is an advisor. It's a friend of Sandra's and mine. I haven't had the chance to collaborate with Nettie. I hope one day too, fairly soon. So this piece, she was one of Canada's top documentary makers, just to be clear. She moved into immersive art. She did a piece called Uninterrupted, which was about the salmon flowing in Vancouver past the river, and it was projected under a bridge, and it was every night was filled. Like people were there. It was amazing. turned out VR. Go fish was her way. Well, she didn't name it and such, but what she did when we went for our walk in Wananette right there, she explained to me, she said, and then I said, you got to go see this. And it was at that point just opening this tiny little gallery on Vancouver Island. And when I saw it, I was amazed. This is a video. Again, the links will be in the follow-up, so I hope you will get to at least see the starter. And if you, it has been here in Toronto, the Aga Khan Foundation, I think, hosted it. And it deals with, it's an immersive video. The acoustic is really important. And it's about a herring. Herring from the point of view of the traditional, the commercial fishery, the indigenous fishery, if that's even a good term to put it, to frame it, I don't know. And then nature and how this complex stakeholders interact. And she conveys it through aesthetics. No narrative, not a word. But what it allows for people to do from each of those communities and who are living with this, the environmentalists, the people that are having their livelihoods maybe threatened, competing interests within those livelihoods, to actually sit with the complexity of the issue, to understand and empathize, to shift. And I would say we are now, one of the biggest challenges we have is we have a dissipating empathy for other worldviews, and maybe even worldviews that are of other species. So the greater than human world, and maybe we need to reweave those. Art is a way to do that, because it doesn't activate our thinking. It can go straight to our aesthetics, like humor. It can bypass and go through very complex awarenesses to get us to a place where we can reform our approach to what we're doing and how we are in the world. Okay. Oh. Maybe you lost a slide. Oh, this was a video, unfortunately. So this will be, when I transferred it over to PowerPoint, we lost all the videos. So this, I will, again, it'll be, and I do encourage it, it's on the MOVE37XR website, which I'll give you a link to at the end. But Casey's work, which is Walk in a Circle. Casey's a Dene artist, amazing artist who's just recently joined our network. And the work, again, doesn't necessarily convey, what's beautiful, but it draws you in to understand the complexity of what he shared. There's an elegance to that when you're just experiencing something. He deals with many issues around his heritage in terms of Indigenous, being in Canada, technology. He works in advanced technologies, emergent visual technologies as well. Fabulous artist. I really encourage you to check out his work. And then hopefully this one will come up. Oh, never mind. That's one of the things. These are trade beads, but I don't think it's going to play. I don't know if I can. Nope, it's not. Okay. Sorry about that. A little bit of a technical glitch. This work, we're actually going to invite you to, not this work, but this artist. On Saturday, there will be an invitation. We have not us, but a studio research lab here in Toronto is offering a 3-hour workshop to learn about biosonification. We heard about data sonification. This is learning how to work with biosonification, and then there'll be a performance. So you'll get to experience a master artist. This is her studio research lab setup. I wanted to put there. And, there's some questions regarding, mother trees and what have you. But this is an exploration about the human and greater human world. Okay. And so Tosca Turan is her name, and does some fabulous work. So this is the invite. So if you have your cameras, you can take it out. You all have access. It is by like $5 donation, but don't worry, just turn up. We'll MOVE37 will cover you. 3 hours, I'll be there with my eldest son, who's studying at Mac right now. And we'll be there 3 to 6. And so that's, if you want a deeper experience to dive into how we actually do this, how we think about it, and then how an artist who's really invited, worked with NASA, who's, I believe, or NASA scientist, and has been invited around the world, worked in at biennales and you name it, really a fabulous artist and fabulous experience. So if you want to come and have some more time with us, that's the opportunity. And then if you want to click there, that's a little bit about, take you to our page and give you our live link and give you a further way to get in contact and to keep abreast of what we're doing. And I think that's it. If anybody has any questions or thoughts, I would do. Yeah. Yes.
So,
Mhm. Yeah.
all the fun that provokes. But I think.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, let's go to getting a piece, right, about the herring, right? Right, there you go. Like here's people that they should be not wanting to be in the same space, but they're all really concerned about this one issue. So it's really about, again, this is the finding the common ground, and this is where I think the places, how do you set, and so what you're asking is how do you set up dialogue to invite people in? And so part of that may be, like, for instance, people might turn up at the planetarium or some place that is non-obvious to experience something. And the whole point of inducing their wisdom, their intelligence from their and empathizing with their way of being and well, to understand there's a rationality, there's an intellect behind that. It's come to make some very distinctive choices. Now that map and the territory might not exactly line up. And that's we're all having that issue, right? That's part of just being a human. We simplify and create models of the world so we can navigate it. Right? If I came to a stoplight and couldn't, know that, oh, I'm supposed to stop, then, so it's there's a heuristic there. But if I had to take in all the data, it would be really impossible to make that decision very quickly on the moment. And when we are in a place of urgency, I think this is the concern. We're in a place of urgency and we are reverting to heuristics, simplified worldviews. So this is the part of how do we reintroduce complexity into people's way of thinking, their vocabulary, and not necessarily understand that you have to understand all the concepts. And that's the beauty of this. We don't have to say, oh, you haven't read all the papers and and there's positionality, because that's where we get into the worldview. And as we know, it's virtually impossible unless somebody has an existential crisis or an ontological, it's virtually impossible to shift somebody's worldview. It's just the way, because we've spent an entire lifetime building on our successes that have then said, okay, this is my worldview, and it must be right, of course. But how I'm fine, right? So, and it's true that it is fine, but it's not necessarily the map of the territory of what is needed now. And so that's the part is turning up in places. Like I made a decision here, even with here, was like, do I take you through an entire hour of just immersive and say nothing? So I had architected a whole different piece, which was just starting with breathing, and just taking you through into an immersive experience, and then ending and not saying a word, and then just leaving you with some papers to think about. Now, I thought, okay, maybe we need a bit of a bridge. Let me turn up where you're at, right? Or where I'm at as well, with some presentation, some research, some notes, some evidence, right? And let's touch into this. Let's start an opening and dialogue so that maybe there's something there. Because it's not that I've pointed out anything that's, truly innovative. Anybody that's been involved in contemplative practice knows you go through this and rethink. But when for myself, I use this science from my own teaching, which is peace. If I'm truly at peace, which is sound, I'll be quite honest with it. When I'm truly at peace, I'm on the right track. That can be in any relationship I'm in. That can be with my work. And that doesn't mean it's easy. I can be going through challenges with it, but I can feel that sense that this is the right thing. I'm at peace with my vector. Right? So that's the part. So coming back to direct answer the question is that there are going to be people of different worldviews. And the only way we get through this is by inviting people, because people have geopolitical impact, and that's who determines our governance systems. And that, as we know, can dictate. And one of the things that way back when in those days of MSF, was looking at the future and understanding when societies undergo pressure from either food or any sort of pressure, bad things can happen, right? I was in Rwanda doing the lead up to the genocide. So I was conducting monitoring there. And in other places that I visited. So that was my direct experience, to witness how, even from a distance, former Yugoslavia, how fast that happened. We didn't even, in Canada, we didn't even have a policy on how to get humanitarian aid because they were trading. It happened so fast. We had to innovate with the Minister of Foreign Affairs office. So the place of that is to really go and understand that coming to these awarenesses is really key. And it's an individual thing. It's an individual journey. And how do we do that with compassion, which is really hard when somebody may hate you for your worldview. You know, we've seen that around dinner tables, what have you. So that it's a hard thing to manage, but this is the part of inviting people. And I think really understanding that not everybody has to make it over here, but enough people have to start, or I think enough people need to start understanding what's really at stake, because even our success metrics may be accelerating us down a path. Unintended consequences. And that's the danger, is that because we believe so much in our worldview, right? And we sometimes are afraid to question it in public or personally because it destabilizes it. But I'm urging folks to actually invite that destabilization and be confident with the practices, with guidance, with appropriate, to undo your assumptions about the map that you're holding. I think that's good. That's just good research. Mm-hmm. That's questioning the models, questioning the assumptions, because we know that there are consequences when we don't. Yes. Any other questions or thoughts? Feedback? Yes, please.
I have a question about the auditory experience.
Yes.
Especially the first one, when you're showing us different data in different tones and like how to. I felt like during that, my emotions were very different based on. Do you have is there a process of coming to a final decision of how you want to then play it in an auditory way? When enough people feel kind of the same way, or is it more of a area of?
Good question, and it's both, right? Because the data can serve as a place to inspire me as an artist, and then I'm expressing it. So there's a transition that occurs in there. So there's me. And then there's the understanding, and this is where it goes to the good art, is to understand what I am expressing may not be what's received, but that's okay, because it's really the good art part of it is that it emerges with the person who's experiencing it, and then it reworks its magic that way. And I will use that word magic because it's a really magical process. It's a non-linear, undefinable process. And if it's really good, then other people that will, and we had that at the Winter Arts Festival when I prototyped Hyperobject 108. People came on the first time, and then they came back, and they brought their kids, and they brought front neighbors. And they didn't, and it was kind of ineffable what was going on, but they sensed there was something. Right, so those aesthetic choices are there, and it's iterative, and that's why another part of the art that I do when I'm doing performance, like we're doing now, no two will be the same. That's a sign of complexity. So I'm feeling here. Let's take our example right here. I'm sensing the audience, what's going on. I'm watching, and I'm playing, and I'm processing, So I'm being in my state. What I'm now, this is maybe something I'll let the yogi secret out. All the twists and turns you're doing on the mat, they just keep you busy. The transmission is the peace, the centeredness. That is that's the piece that resonates. And then if you bring your intellect and your wisdom to that, then it filters through your world. So does that answer the question?
Super cool.
Yeah, okay. Yes, please.
Thank you. You've done a fantastic job in criticizing the reductionist approach to complexity.
Mhm.
Complexity, of course, is inherent, I suggest to you,
Yes,
in natural and social systems.
I agree.
Therefore, perhaps that's a fundamental problem for our perception of our consciousness, which
Yes.
is both transient and also, how do you say it, different from
Mhm.
us. So this, I suggest, are more fundamental problems. If you assume complexity to be a problem. I would.
I love how you phrase, because there we look at the problem solution. I love that was a beautiful and elegant frame because it recurses to the the modernist thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like so we're right. So yeah.
I would like to invite you to, I mean, without premise,
Yes.
talk about some of the social problems that we have, for example, climate change, the differences in perceptions of what we understand to be reality, and therefore our problems understood as problems, migration, and these sorts of social problems.
So sorry, can you frame the question just a little tighter for me?
I just would like you to, based on the premise that I would like you to see if you could comment on these problems, social problems like climate change or migration.
Right, and so the premise being complexity is a problem, or
That it is inherent.
yes, okay, fair enough. Yes, complexity is inherent. So and that's an assumption, and so these problems are, shall we say, they are the emergence, right? So this is the part to understand, and this is where I'll encourage you to, in fact, let me see, I might even, okay, I'm going to flip through some of the slides that I didn't get to. It's here. Working. There we go. Okay, there you go. Okay, these are, oh, there we go. This is one of Julian's. Okay. From 2024. And so Julian Norris, and so we can see the systems and then complexity over here. Okay? And so these look through very different approaches to understanding systems thinking, which is there's going to be things that are emergence. They are, so systems thinking says, okay, we've got something that's here, and then we look back to the precursors of it and optimize to the things that we want that are occurring. There's inherent assumptions that we understand how the precursors work together, right? That's the challenge. And I will say, when I was doing my MFA thesis, which was on systems and creating organizational systems and systems that generated compassion and financial as a byproduct, which I couldn't pursue in my MBA. So that's why I did it as an MFA. I was here, right? Cybernetics, what have you. And move through this. This is my permaculture phase. and really, hands in the soil, having the land teach me. Yeah? And then here is where I've come to be. And what the difference is that now, and this is again how Julian frames it, which I thought was really remarkable, is that emergence are forward looking. You look at what's happening, and then you imply and intuit and anticipate what may happen, and then you experiment, in this present to the future, not looking at trying to replicate something that's already happened and look at the precursors. Now, what do I need to pay attention to here? It requires intuition. I would put forth to you that the finest scientists, the finest engineers, and the finest artists actually share this trait. It's you look and you look deeply. and you use that intuition. You take those leaps of faith and you experiment, you explore. That's the commonality. I think that's the genius of our species. That we can do this. We've done it for a millennia. Right? So we just maybe need to remember that and bring it back in, because it's very easy when we're in institutions, right? You know, these iceberg models and what have you, right? And you know, universities come out of this place of, you know, systems and modernist thinking. When we get over here, we're looking at auto-generation and reality and livingness. And that's where the apparent symptoms of migration, the emergence. Why are we migrating, right? This is the part people say, oh, it's because of lack of food. Well, okay, what about political instability? What about, you know, do people really want to move? I don't know people that want to move from their community if they're happy and content and their children have a future and they're living in peace. Right? So, but there's emergence that are become things that we need to pay attention to, and then it's working back into them saying, okay, now how do we shift that, and then how do we deal with the complexity of such a situation? The challenge, of course, which we have yet to deal with, we have institutions like the UN, the SDGs, we're trying to deal with being we're in the advocacy as this global force of nature. Do we have the governance systems for doing that? Perhaps it's more fundamental. I'm just putting that as a thought. Maybe it's a more fundamental issue. It's how each of us in that system works together and re-networks. More of a mycelial issue. And that's why I encourage you to come to Saturday to experience an ontological possibility for yourselves. Is that a reasonable answer? But I would be happy to continue the discussion, because again, I'm interested in this, right? Is that there's a livingness, and it's a good challenge, right? Because it's about resting, it's about exploring and being present. That's the emergence. So practice what you preach, I guess. I don't do it all the time. I'm just like everybody else. Yeah, I love Kit Kat bars. Anything else? Please. And feel free, you have my email. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out. Feel free to reach out. You can follow us on Instagram or on LinkedIn. We're continuing. Oh, and I should say we're spreading. We've got part of our mission is we're creating research labs or connecting with research labs and studios all around the world to work on this, again, in a network way, and exchanging bioregional wisdom and practices, not only with artists and cultural memory, but with ecological. And so we're creating works that we can then port around without necessarily moving physical beings, through using the technologies that we have to understand that maybe these ancient wisdom, these indigenous ways of knowing and being in relationship with the rhythm and human world, provide our existence.
Okay.